Hello friends, I am Ashish Darbari, founder and CEO of Axiomise. To our new listeners, welcome. To our old ones, welcome back. Today we are joined by Dr. Sean Safarpour, Group Director at Synopsys. Okay, so Sean, welcome to our podcast. You're a busy man heading the VC Formal product line at Synopsys. And you've taken time to talk to us, so thank you very much for joining in. And I know we have to talk about a lot of interesting formal verification stuff. But before we do that, I would like to take the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, although we've known each other for some time, but it would be good for our listeners to get to know a bit more about your personal journey into science, into formal verification, into Synopsys. Anything that you would like to share with our listeners?
Okay. Hi, Ashish. Thank you very much for, inviting me onto your podcast. I think first, before I get into a little bit of, my background and my journey into formal, I want to take a minute and just, thank you for what you're doing. I think that you're doing a great service here to our community. I think it's something that, your podcast and all your education for people wanting to learn more about formal verification and how to get to use it and become more effective at it. I think you're doing great work for us. So firstly, thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
And I know it's only been a few weeks, but I saw some of the numbers. I think you're having some good success there, and I wish you more in the future.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so about my journey. So my first exposure was through grad school. Full disclosure, I'm Canadian.
Oh, nice.
Born and raised in Canada.
I thought you were American. You sounded more American, but I've got no subtleties to figure out if somebody is Canadian or American. So no offense, of course.
And I don't know. People say that if I say about. That gives it away. Some people say Canadians say a boot or about. There's different ways of saying that. But yeah, so the reason why I bring that up is, I did my schooling in Canada, and for grad school, I went to the University of Toronto there. And it was basically in grad school when I got started. My advisor basically gave me a whole bunch of books, a whole bunch of papers, and said, go read. Go figure out what's happening in the field. And I started reading these papers, and this was kind of, the early 2000s. And this new thing was coming out, SAT solvers, right? So for some of your listeners that don't know, satisfiability solvers are some of the fundamental reasoning engines that enable, all these formal verification tools that we have today. And so I came across them, and it was very exciting. There was SAT competition. There was all these papers coming out. This was kind of around the time that ZChaf was one of the solvers from University of Princeton came out, and they had some clever algorithmic ways of tackling the problem. So I got really into it. I decided to make that one of my topics, and my contribution to the field was kind of learning from the circuit context and extracting that information from the circuit structures, kind of controllability and observability, don't cares, and then apply them to the Boolean SAT problems in order to speed it up and tackle some of these hard problems. So that's when I got started, and it's kind of interesting. I recall, it's kind of weird the things you remember, but I recall this one session. I was sitting in the lab. It was late evening one time. I was kind of alone in this big computer lab that we had. And I had put in some helpers to help visualize how the SAT solver was doing its decision making and reasoning and backtracking and stuff. And I remember I I was analyzing all these log files, and I thought it was totally fascinating how it was going about solving the problem, and just it wasn't doing what I had coded it to do. It wasn't doing what I expected it to do, and I thought, man, this is kind of like an organism, if you will, kind of going around and finding its own way and finding its path to the solution. That's kind of the moment that I kind of really fell in love with it and kind of stuck on. Yeah.
No, that's really that's really nice to hear. And actually, what you're describing here is exactly how graduate students get into a new topic, and we're kind of doing a self-discovery and discovering the field. So I think I need to come back to you again on the topic of SAT solvers, and depending on how much time we have today, we may need to get you back again to go into a deep dive session, because they are, as you said, very important engines that actually are powering up the formal tools. And I'm not sure how many people are actually aware about it. So, we train people at Axiomise. We're providing training for formal verification, but a lot of this is applied in how to actually use the tools effectively for methodology. And I do come across a lot of engineers in the industry who ask me these questions. And funny enough, there is a desire to learn more about the back-end technology, which I hadn't initially thought it might be. So what actually got you to look into the formal space in the first place, or even pursue a PhD? So why did you, PhD is not something, I happen to do it. I had my own reasons, but it's not something a lot of us do.
So that was a little bit of my kind of master's, path into research there. But once I got into it, and the whole SAT thing opened up the model checking world to me.
Yeah, that's right. It was that decade. Yeah, it was that decade where SAT solvers were becoming mainstream in model checking. So yeah, it looks like you were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the PhD thing is kind of interesting. So one, the technology was really cool. I wanted to learn more about it. Second, up until then, I hadn't traveled much. And then as a poor grad student, I learned that, wait a second, every time you publish a paper,
you get to travel. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, so then I started publishing like crazy, and my advisor wanted me to do journals, but I wanted to do conference papers that would get to travel.
Yeah, no, but these are the side benefits of doing PhD. So Sean, this was early 2000. You started your PhD journey into formal verification. And I recall in 2018, you ended up writing a book on formal verification. What a fascinating 18 years it must have been for you. But tell me a little bit more about what is this book? And my listeners want to know more about it. I've read this book, so I know what you're talking about. But I think you need to describe it from your own perspective.
Sure. So actually, a couple of years ago at Synopsys, we were kind of really looking at the landscape of formal verification applications. And we were trying to see, I guess maybe some of the topics we'll cover today, we were trying to see, why is it that this powerful technology that you have countless people, countless champions really swearing by it and saying that it has saved them tons of effort, millions of dollars, found bugs that no other technique would have found. So you have these people that are so passionate about it in practice, right? I'm talking people at, major companies talking about the dollars they've saved by using formal technology. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have even more people that have some of them really, they have no clue what it is. And maybe they've heard about it. They know there's sessions at conferences about it, but they really don't know where to get started. And so we started with that problem of how can we get these people that have very little exposure to that technology and the applications, how can we help them get educated? But also, what is the gap in the kind of material and literature landscape.
Sure.
And we found that, of course, on the back-end part, there's countless academic papers and books, and you can go very, very deep.
Indeed.
Yeah, and even today you can go on YouTube and there's, lectures and stuff put up there. So you can get access to that pretty easily. We thought that also in terms of really, using the tools, the vendors have good material, like us at Synopsys. Once you kind of come into our site, there's lots of tutorials and videos and examples. So if you want to learn how to use a tool, you're there.
Sure.
But we thought that there is this gap, both for people that are curious and kind of want to, they want to figure out how to get started, but also for management.
Yeah.
We made sure that part of our audience, we're focusing on that verification engineer or the verification lead or the executive there, that maybe some people in his team are doing for formal, maybe he or she wants to do more investment into formal.
Is this a book, sorry to interrupt you, is this a book that managers should definitely take a look at, and senior executives, if they wanted to get a better feel of the value add proposition of formal? Is that who your target audience is for this book?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we made sure to keep that audience in mind as we were writing this book. And it's a really quick read. We wrote it in a way, Ashish, I think you actually...
yeah, I read it. I wrote a recommendation. I really do think people should read it because there's a lot of useful stuff in it that people would find nowhere else. So it's absolutely useful text. And my perception was also that it is targeted to a person who is not a formal expert, and he wants to understand the value proposition of what it is going to be good for if you wanted to invest more in formal. And that's the kind of thing that has been completely absent, as you said, we're standing tall on the shoulders of these formal giants, right? We've done tons of stuff in algorithms and logics. And yet when it comes to its widespread use, my perception is exactly the same as yours, that on one half you've got passion and, people like you and I who know what the value add is in our customers, but on the other hand, there are lots of people who are crying out to get more out of it. And they're running around and not enough things out there. So this is an interesting thing, but I don't think you guys have actually done a lot more after you published the book. I know you wrote a blog, but somehow I feel like when you're writing a book or even a blog, you need to kind of follow these things up with more sustained thing, because people tend to forget, right? We're living in this age of WhatsApp and Twitter and Facebook, right? So a short-term memory is a few seconds, right? So I think maybe you guys should do some kind of an event where you should keep reminding the best parts of the book or nice summary articles. I think it would be valuable for the wider world to gain access to that kind of insight. And perhaps things are moving fast as well, so getting to do a check again on where we are. 2 years is not a big time, but in semiconductor industry, 2 years is a big enough time, because so many changes are happening. But no, that's really nice. Well, so this book is not free, so you have to buy it. So perhaps people can order this on Amazon, or what's the...
So here's the thing actually. So the book actually is free if you go on to the digital version is free.
Oh, I see.
If you want a hard copy, you have to go to Amazon. Even
better. So there's no excuse for not reading it now.
yeah, absolutely. So go ahead. If you go on the Synopsys website and then you go to the VC Formal product, there's tons of material, but there is a link to the book to download. It's been downloaded. I think I checked maybe a quarter ago, close to 5,000 times. So wow. I think it's pretty good.
Cool.
And we've we of course at Synopsys we have these snug events and so on, and we do give away a lot of those books. I think that's the right place, because you get a lot of managers that come in. There's people that work on very different problems and different technologies,
sure.
And it's a really quick read for them. But to your point about following up, I totally agree. And we try to kind of follow that up both with, like you said, the blog, but as well as our special interest group.
Yeah,
and,
I'll come to the special interest group
all...
in a second. I'll come to the special interest group in a second, but I'm quite aware about your time and how busy you are, so I want to make sure I get some of my questions answered. So,
Yeah.
so Sean, I love talking to you. We are good friends, we're good buddies, and you're heading one of the most important products in the industry, the VC Formal family, made by Synopsys. But to be honest, I'm not sure why people should look at it. You guys are one of the last entrants in the industry. We've had products from other vendors. I know you made a really cool tool, Hector, which I'm aware of people using it. I've had some interaction with Hector. But why should I care about VC Formal property checking? What's so unique about it? Why should I spend any dollar? So that's my first. This is a thing that's my itch, if you know what I mean. So maybe you can persuade me to look at VC Formal more seriously.
Sounds good. That sounds good. So here's the thing. Yes, you are right. We are the newest kid on the block, and VC Formal. Actually, we think that is one of our main advantages. You made that comment about standing on shoulders of giants and so on. Informal verification, at least on the commercial side, we're also standing on a lot of skeletons. What I mean by that, there's a lot of companies and tools out there that have unfortunately failed. If you look at the 2000, I remember, when I was coming out, maybe mid-2000s, there was at least a dozen companies claiming to have property verification tools. And some of them, went away. Some of them morphed into other kind of companies, and so on. But when we launched VC Formal now, probably around 6 years ago, and not launched, meaning taking it to the market, but trying to start the whole effort from scratch. The idea was, what is it that we can do to not only get into this market, but help grow the market. I think, again, we have this thing where some people may look at, for example, what other tools have done in the past and kind of the successes that they've had, which I'm not trying to demean, but formal verification has really not penetrated the market the way that I think it should. It is such powerful technology, and I think that there is a problem that every designer, every verification engineer can use formal to solve. Not just the property verification, but also the apps, right?
Yeah.
So it would be unheard of, to tell an engineer, hey, you don't need to use a debugger. You don't need to look at a waveform viewer. That would be like ludicrous, right? So I think that's kind of where formal is. When I hear of people, writing, test benches or test cases to go ahead and come up with one example of how this FSM works, of how this, you just know there's so many better tools out there that can tackle that problem in a more efficient way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that us as a community, and that's why I like what you're doing, I think we need to educate more, and the potentials and the benefits of it still hasn't been truly tapped.
Yeah, so just going back to why should I care about VC Formal, I obviously know why I would like to use VC Formal, and we are partners of Synopsys, and I use VC Formal all the time. I do understand that there has been a gap, and I totally accept your point that we should learn from the mistakes of others, and VC Formal. To me, it is about bringing together your technology of Verde that people were used to before, but I think you basically engineered, from what I gather, a system that is trying to mitigate some of the shortcomings and the pitfalls of the previous tools or the ones that were existing in the market. But I would still like to know, what do you think are the key pluses? So, is it like your compilers are faster or your solvers are faster? what is the impression you're getting from the field as to why people should be looking at VC Formal more than any other tool?
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. My answer is quite a bit long-winded there.
It's all right.
So basically, where I was going with that is that as we're trying to get more users of formal verification, we looked at it from scratch and we decided there's a couple things we need to do. One, there's really two things. One is looking at the broad market. How can we get that technology in the hands of people, get them value quicker? And the way to do that is really through our platform, which you kind of touched based on.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, VC Formal, the entire front end is VCS. So VCS is a very popular, maybe the most popular simulator out there. A lot of users use it. Once you have it compiled with VCS, it's trivial to get it working with VC Formal.
This I believe is a very clever idea, because what you guys have done is you've integrated the front end of the simulator with the formal tools, and now you're creating a bridge between the simulation users and your formal users. So I think this is where the trend seems to be going. But you guys were on it. Carry on, please.
So that was something that was architected actually. When we were building it from scratch, that we wanted to reuse the front end. We wanted to take that pain away to bridge the simulation to formal users. And along the same way, we have basically the de facto debugger, which is Verde. And instead of, again, building kind of a formal specific debug environment, we said, let's basically reuse Verde, and anything specific for formal that we need, we'll add some customized windows. But if you need a waveform viewer, the standard N-Wave will work there. If you need to look at the source code, it's the standard source for Verde. So again, we bridge that gap through the platform. So what that means is that we're going to that vision of if I'm an engineer and maybe I use a formal tool 10% of the time, like let's say every 2-3 months, I do something and I need to bring up VC Formal. You don't have to keep relearning, one, how do I compile it? Two, how do I debug it? Where was this button again?
Yeah.
We're trying to take that barrier down and pretty much eliminate it.
So what are you guys offering in the coverage space? So I am talking to my customers and I often get asked this question as to what is the solution to the coverage problem, and there doesn't seem to be a unique solution in the industry. There does seem to be many different coverage solutions. So what is Synopsys' answer to the coverage problem for formal?
Yeah, actually, I think that again goes to one of our strengths. So I think we have pretty solid solution. So coverage is a loaded term. People coming from the simulation world mean something else. People coming in from the formal world mean something else.
Mm-hmm.
So firstly, we have the VCS coverage data is basically consumed also by Verde and all the other platforms. So we work within that database, so the coverage database. And we do things like there's a whole bunch of different analysis that you can do, like reachability analysis. You can do reachability with bounds to see, how many cycles does it get to hit a particular line in your code. You can see whether a code is not reachable, if it's not reachable because of the structure of it. Mm-hmm. Is it like dead code? Mm-hmm. Or is it due to kind of over constraints that you've put in there?
Right. Okay.
So that's really the fundamentals. We have that in place. Now, the really cool thing is for people that are doing formal for a living pretty much, right? So guys and gals that are doing formal on blocks, and then they're taking the risk, going to their managers saying, you know what, you don't need to do simulation on this. I've fully verified it end to end, and I think I'm fully covered. For those folks, what we want to do is firstly help them make sure that there are no gaps, right? When they say I'm done, they're really done.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one. That's a different topic. I think we can spend a lot of time.
Of course,
but then what we want to do is we want to take that data about what was covered in formal and then map it over or translate it over to kind of code coverage metrics that
are you guys
simulation or
merging?
verification manager kind of understands.
I see. So you guys are actually taking that data out of the formal space and providing some kind of a merged view with simulation coverage. Okay. I think we need to come back to this topic, and I need to certainly get you back to do a more deep dive. For today, I don't want to go too much deep on the cover side, but I love talking about this problem. One thing I wanted to talk to you about while our listeners are still with us is this special interest group thing that you guys started a few years ago. I know I went to one of them in Bangalore, and I was quite astounded to see that the room was full of people. And it looks. I was like, okay, more and more people are getting interested in formal. Tell us about why you did this in the first place, and how is this event coming along in the last couple of years or 3 years since when you started this?
Yeah. Thank you. So the reason why I kind of smile is it was doing pretty good before this COVID-19 thing.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
Who knows what's the status of conferences to come. But yeah, no. So the reason we again, it's kind of the whole idea behind the book, behind the launch of the product, some of the different apps and so on, and as well as the special interest group for VC Formal, is really bring the community together and help people learn from each other. I think that if you look at the spectrum of the users out there, you find a good deal of differences, not just in terms of kind of background and application or how much they apply the technology, but even in the different ways and the apps and so on that they use. So you will have we have users and customers that are using sequential equivalence checking, for example. They're just using it across the board. It's kind of like a hammer that anything they see, boom, 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 there's nails everywhere. They use it across the board. They see so much value. And we talk to them and they report back they found hundreds of bugs with this app. Then you ask them about some of the other apps. What about connectivity checking or register verification or data path verification? Oh, that's not being used.
Right.
Then you go to another customer and they will swear by connectivity checking. And again, they will be using it as a sign-off. It's mandatory. They have a whole list of bugs. So, we bring these people together. And if I do it or if, our team does it, it sounds like we're trying to promote the tool or we, maybe a little bit of marketing. But when the users get together, they talk about, they present what they've done, their shared data, I think that goes a long way. Goes a long way.
So you're providing a leveler amongst different customers and allowing the information to sort of diffuse between people and companies, which, I like these events. I think they're very good for the wider community. Hey, I would like to carry on talking to you forever because we both love formal and there's a lot to cover. But in the interest of your time, I would like to actually wrap up today's podcast, but I would like you to provide 5 tips for our listeners. And a lot of our listeners are actually graduate students like you and I were at one point of time, or early professionals trying to adopt formal. What are those things that you would like to give as suggestions to our listeners? What can they do to get the most out of their engineering career, formal verification career, or generally speaking, verification?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, I think that my top advice out there is be curious. And I think if somebody is listening to your podcast right now, I think they've had a good start. But there is tons of material out there. I think that if you do spend the time to look on on the web, the different kind of forums and YouTube and podcasts and so on, there is tons of material. Be curious. I myself, every once in a while, I go and check out what's been talked at different conferences. And it's kind of amazing, how life will work. Sometimes you are listening to something that you might just find it interesting, but a few months down the road, you may actually find that knowledge useful. So that's the first one. The second one, I think, if somebody is getting started in this domain, I say find a buddy. Find a buddy. I mean, find a mentor if possible.
Yeah, that's very good advice.
If you're in a company, if you've had people that have, dabbled in it, I wouldn't say it doesn't even have to be an expert.
Yep.
Just somebody to bounce ideas with. Say, hey, I read this paper. What do you think about it? I tried this tool. I think you get a lot more out of it when there's at least two or more people kind of exchanging ideas.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Yeah.
So another one, I think, now I'm thinking more in terms of if you're somebody at a company and maybe they're not doing a lot of formal and you're trying to do more, I think do take the time and try to challenge that status quo.
And it's very hard. It's very hard for a new person, but that's what we got to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's enough voices out there and there's enough experiences out there that I can say with confidence, if you do put in the time, the data will back up, what you're doing. So if you do want to challenge the status quo, go about it, collect the data, take the data to, management or whoever, and kind of approach it that way. But it's not just doable, but almost every company that you see out there, from the big guys, the Intels and Apples and of the world that are doing so much formal, they all started with one guy, one person. Yeah. And that one person kind of infected others in a good way, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
and that led to kind of this growth. And then maybe finally, my thing is, have fun. I find this stuff really exciting. I think if you find some enjoyment out of it, you will get a lot more. Like your productivity will go up, the results will go up. Don't just look at it in terms of a labor. Try to find the lighter side of things, and have fun.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. If you're not enjoying what we're doing, then it is always hard to get out of the bed and look at the day. And if it feels like it's a chore, it's probably not for you. But as you said, you've got to start somewhere, be curious, always challenge the status quo, get a good buddy, try and actually take help from people who've been in the field. And these are all valid, good suggestions, and I hope my listeners would be following your tips and they would be taking their first step in the field of formal verification. I would certainly like to take the opportunity to get you back again, Sean, if your time permits. And thank you very much for offering your time today. You have offered a lot of valuable insight about why formal verification makes sense and what managers can get out of this. Your book, your special interest groups that Synopsys is doing, your product portfolio where your tools are actually challenging the status quo. So there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of Synopsys, and you, my friend, are at the helm of it at Synopsys. So well done for making these contributions. And we will touch base again. And for now, I would like to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashish. I'm very happy to be on your podcast. Happy to come back again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
So friends, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Do let us know by emailing us at info@axiomise.com or going to our Axiomise YouTube channel. Stay connected, stay home, stay safe, and we will be back next week.